So I got quite the awesome talk for you guys today. This subject of contacts, this subject of UFOs, obviously this is a UFO conference. What I try to bring to the table for you is not the same presentation that you're going to hear year after year with just subtle tweaks and modifications. I try to always push the envelope forward, and I see this whole thing as more than just entertainment. I see this as a political initiative. And we have a situation where the WikiLeaks disclosures lead to this whole Pizzagate thing. And we got to try to get that volume down. It's distracting. So this Pizzagate subject got very, very close to the bone for the elite. Because, look, everything that stuff had said, I already had written about in the book Financial Tyranny back in late 2011, early 2012. I had a whole chapter on this stuff in the book about how, for example, the Hollywood movie industry is using techniques that were perfected by the CIA on their actors called MK Ultra mind control or Monarch mind control. We've talked about how there are actual pieces of propaganda that appear in mainstream entertainment, and this includes music videos, films, even things like the Grammy Awards and the Super Bowl halftime show, in which we are seeing blatant Luciferian symbolism shown to us. And I am not a Bible banger, okay? I'm not trying to say that you have to be saved by the blood of the Lamb or any of this kind of stuff. But what I am saying is, you might not take this seriously, but they do. They're very serious about their religion. And they are completely against anyone who believes in God, whatever you choose that word to mean. This is why they hate Jews. This is why they hate Muslims. And this is why they hate Christians. Look at how each of these groups has been demonized by various factions of the cabal, whether it's the Nazis or whether it's the Americans. So, we got to have this war against terrorism. That basically means war against Muslims. And then you see these incredible efforts being made to marginalize Christianity. And I've always said this, why do they care? Church attendance is down to like 11% in America. It's even lower than that in Europe. Nobody's going. So this old world paradigm of where we literally had 38,830 denominations of Christianity. I'm not kidding. That was an officially documented study. 10,000 other religions or factions of religions, but 38,830 versions of Christianity. And of that number, at least a certain percentage of them, and probably a high percentage, thinks that their way is the only way. So do I disagree with the cabal saying that we need to move beyond religion? Not necessarily. I don't think it's cool that there's 38,000 denominations of Christianity all fighting with each other. And when we create religion, we're basically getting secondhand information. And yet there are certain spiritual traditions in which you get experiential knowingness of what's really going on. You get direct knowledge. And that direct knowledge is not something you can ignore. If you have a near-death experience, you know that there is life after death. You know that there is a greater place that we're going, and that there is some higher initiative behind being human than just trying to make the best impression that you can while you're here and then dying and disappearing into an eternal black nothingness. It was really strange because both my grandparents were Presbyterians, and they went to church, at least sometimes, the typical holiday visits. But both of them, when they got close to their death, basically didn't believe that anything else was going to happen. So it was strange for me because as a star child, as this ET soul, it never even was a question that there was life after death. When I was 5 years old, I floated out of my own body. And I'm watching myself sleep in bed, and my body is breathing, and I'm still alive. But yet, if that's me down there, then who the hell am I watching this? And that made me realize, okay, well, if I die, I'm just going to go into this other form that's really cool because I can fly and I can do all kinds of neat stuff and everything seems all right. I was fortunate in that sense to always know that there's something more. So what we're seeing is, ultimately, a spiritual battle taking place here on earth, a battle that most people do not understand. And if you fail to grasp that fundamental truth, then the seeds that are being planted in your mind and heart at this event will probably never grow into anything substantial. The spiritual battle, for me, is the key of this whole thing. And again, I'm not going to pump the Bible because all the other texts basically predict the same situation. I talked about this last night in the prophecy talk. I'm going to talk about it again on Monday in the post-conference event. The only other thing I have left after this is the panel tomorrow at 2 p.m. And we're going to get into disclosure on that as well, and ancient civilizations. And it's going to be here. What I'm saying to you now is, you have to look behind the alarmist headlines, and you have to understand that if these people in the world, if these world elites that have controlled 80% of all the money there is to earn in the world, that was proven by Dr. James Glatfelder, a guy who is a graduate of the Swiss Financial Institute of Technology, FIT. And they specialize in teaching people about the financial system. Einstein went to that school. He used supercomputers and cracked the 40,000 plus transnational corporations in a database called Orbis. And the conclusion that comes out of that is that once you get below the surface and you start to use, supercomputers and fuzzy logic to crack those codes, deep down inside, 3 or 4 levels below what's obvious, everybody's got the same people on the boards of directors. All these corporations are actually interconnected. And you only have a super entity, as they called it, of 147 corporations. That's it. 147. And those 147 are earning 80% of all the money in the world. That is staggering. That goes way beyond the idea of, well, I wonder if the government controls the media. It has more to do with what do we see when Glatfelder and his associates published the top 50 names of those 147 corporations. What do you think are in those corporation names? About 2/3 of them are financial institutions. And in the top 50 are listed all of the so-called too big to fail banks, which in the aftermath of the 2008 financial collapse and the dawning of the Obama administration, a total of what now has been calculated by U.S. senators, including Ron Paul, $29 trillion of money that they printed out of thin air to bail out this sinking ship of these too big to fail banks. $29 trillion. To try to give you a sense of what that means, all the money that is being earned in the entire world is called the gross domestic product, if you use it as a world GDP, gross domestic product. That's half of the entire wealth of the world, printed out of nothing, with no collateral, with no backing, when they screwed up and their businesses tanked and they weren't making any money, and instead of going bankrupt, they stole half of the wealth of the entire world to bail this thing out. This happened in 2008 after the financial collapse. It's probably one of the reasons why John McCain lost, because he said the fundamentals of the economy are sound. Well, dude, I think you're wrong. Now, why did that happen? Why did they lose out so much? Why did they have this apocalyptic collapse of their value such that they had to do something so big that probably nobody would have ever believed that you would print $29 trillion out of thin air. Why did they do that? Why did that happen? There is a simple intrinsic fact that I want to share with you now, and that fact is this. Some of the people that you would hear at conferences like this, and I don't know if there's any of them here or not. I'm not insinuating that anybody is like this here. But sometimes when you listen to people who are more in the so-called conspiracy theory arena, there is a prevailing viewpoint that I believe, based on extensive research and firsthand testimony with insiders, I believe is wrong. It is this idea that the so-called Illuminati, New World Order, cabal, whatever nomenclature you want to pick, is this all-encompassing, all-powerful, all-seeing eye that has their fingers in everybody's phone, that is surveilling everyone, that is identifying any potential threat and neutralizing that threat. It is the fear of Big Brother, the fear that there is a monster under the bed that you need to be afraid of, and that there is nothing that will stop this beast. And they play on the archetypal fear that we have of things like the devil by showing us satanic imagery right in your face. So unbelievable. You watch some of the Miley Cyrus music videos, some of the Rihanna music videos where she's got devil horns, some of the ones from Katy Perry where she's got the all-seeing eye and she's wearing satanic clothing. Lady Gaga dressed up in animal blood and animal meat. Unbelievable. And you can just tick down the list. It's basically now, it seems like almost everybody out there in the pop music arena who's getting to be really publicized by this controlled media is putting out this type of propaganda. They're putting out these symbols. They're putting out this thought form. And you're seeing things like the Super Bowl halftime show where Madonna shows up as Baphomet, which is the goat-horned god that was worshipped by the Knight Templars. And the Knight Templars appear to be one of the precursor groups that led to what we call the Illuminati. Not all Knight Templars are bad. Not all Freemasons are bad. In fact, the Freemasons caused the American Revolution. That was a good thing. They were standing up against the cabal, the British Empire. If you really want to understand this thing, where you start rewinding the clock a little bit, you go back to the Roman Empire. And when their empire was in decline, after they'd already conquered Egypt and acquired all of that knowledge, secret knowledge that they never publicized, they wanted to restart the game, but they had to relocate where they were going to do it. And as far back as 55 BC, Julius Caesar had invaded England. Before Christ even showed up, Julius Caesar had invaded England, and that was the precursor to the Roman incursion of England beginning in 100 AD. Why is England so important? Because it is a perfectly defensible continental island. It's like a mini continent with a nice big moat around it. That means that if you fortify your shore, the only way anybody could invade is navally. And you look around Europe, and there is no other place like England where this would work. Every other country has, at best, only a mountain border. But mountains are easier to traverse than water. In water, you got to have all your supplies, all your food, all your military people on a ship that has to land on the shore. They have to disembark from the ship. They have to charge into your land. That makes it much, much harder, especially if you have enough firepower that you can start shooting arrows at them when they're trying to get out of the ship, that kind of thing. So England was the perfect place. So as of about 100 AD, the Romans began relocating to England. When I visited Graham Hancock, he lives in the city of Bath. And he actually has, his house is right near Roman baths that were built around this time, 100 AD. They're still there, built by the Romans. You got to go a little bit farther and you got to see, okay, wait a minute. The people that had the secret knowledge held over in the Library of Alexandria, the people who were aware of what the Vatican initiative was, they relocated their base of operations to England, and that's where they built their financial center. The Vatican remained the so-called spiritual center. That becomes the financial center, and then when the time was right, they had these ancient maps. They knew there was land over on the west that became what we now call America, perhaps named after Amerigo Vespucci. There's a couple different theories. And they knew about this. And so Queen Elizabeth was one of the first people. Henry VIII was her father. And Henry VIII, based on a book like Born in Blood, The Secrets of Freemasonry, talks about the idea that Henry VIII was the first real cabal king of England, that they kind of had lost control. They kind of insinuate themselves into the monarchy. So Elizabeth is also one of these Illuminati monarchs. We know for a fact that Queen Elizabeth was working with a court astrologer named John Dee, and that he was using black magic to ensure England's success. There were two different times that a massive Spanish armada started to come towards England. They wanted to do that invasion by sea. And John Dee is conjuring up probably what ended up now being the Draco. We didn't really know that for sure back then, but it's looking like that's who it was. And they say, the Draco say to them, don't worry, don't even try to fight them, don't send any ships out into the sea, don't try to meet them in the water, just sit back and do nothing. Well, we know you guys are real, you're materializing in the middle of our pentagram here, so okay. And these, the Spanish Armada comes in 2 times in a row, documented history. This massive, massive storm shows up that was so bad that the entire armada got wiped out. Everybody sank. This was in the 1500s, early 1500s. Twice. It happened twice. Now that looks like magic, but remember, if you have anti-gravity, if you have a flying craft, all you'd have to do is create gravitational disruption around those ships and start boiling the sea, and then they'll all sink. Easy. Easy for somebody who is an extraterrestrial. So what we have is a very clear idea that there is this extraterrestrial negativity behind why England has been able to succeed so well. And sure enough, the book that I wrote, Financial Tyranny, which was so groundbreaking, started with this idea that the mega banks actually control 80% of the wealth in the world, talks about this $29 trillion bailout, and goes into this strange religion that they have. None of this really makes sense until you get to the fact that they actually do have an organized religion that is not any other religion we're normally aware of. It is a secret religion. It's actually in many ways a lot more complicated and difficult to understand than other religions. Most other religions have a fairly simple set of precepts. There's 1 or 2 texts to read. There's a Bible, there's a Quran, there's an Old Testament, a New Testament. There's the Bhagavad Gita, there's Dhammapada, Buddha's Book of Righteousness. There's a few texts you can read and you pretty much got it. Illuminati religion is not like that at all. It's extremely complex. It's a group that cherry-picked from ancient mystery schools all over the world, and at various points there were groups that were positive involved in this, and that would include the founding fathers of the United States of America. I think we can all agree that that was not a negative thing that they did. But a lot of those positive groups got washed under by the influence of negative extraterrestrials who took this power that was amassed through secrecy and consolidated it into a political worldwide empire. An empire that has 3 cities within nations that are their own nation states. Vatican City, which is the spiritual center, City of London, which is the financial center, and Washington, D.C., which is the military center. That's the way it's been. And again, most people have completely divorced themselves from any concern about what's going on in Christianity or the Bible. But I'll tell you what, when you start realizing what these people are up to and the kind of symbols that they're advertising and shoving in our face, why are they so invested in this? Why did Jesus show up 55 years after the people in his nation, where he was, had started to colonize Great Britain? I think there was some greater initiative that knew that this new move needed to be opposed if it was ever going to turn out well for us. And so, as a result, the whole reputation of the Roman Empire was forever stained by the arrival of Jesus. And what was this Jesus thing? Anyway, a man who supposedly can walk on water, can heal the sick, restore eyesight to people who are blind. There's a story in the Bible about a woman who's done all these, things like cheat on her husband, and Jesus starts telling her exactly what she did. He knows it psychically. She starts crying. She realizes he's got to be the real thing. There's all kinds of weird stories like this. And there's other stories from other religions. And that's the thing that really bothers me is, like, as soon as people pick one religion, you start acting as if your cool stories are the only ones that count. But yet, we have this Catholic priest, Father Francis Tiso, who is going to Tibet and studying the rainbow body phenomenon, where people are activating their soul into some higher form through being a loving person. The whole teaching is based on being as loving as possible, forgiving, accepting, and spending 13 years where you do not have a negative thought. And if you can do that, which would be nearly impossible in today's world, as I've been saying, if you can do 13 years where you're basically just a loving, kind, generous person, you don't have selfish thoughts, you're not trying to manipulate anybody, you're just hardworking, you're honorable, you're sincere, you can do that for 13 years, you've graduated from the entire reason to be on earth, and you just activate your light body and you get to leave the earth to a much less difficult place. If you look at the core of Buddhist teaching, it's all about the fact that we are in a realm of suffering, which he calls samsara. And that samsaric delusion captivates us with the idea that we will find happiness in the material world. And it really did work for a while. If you look at the economic curve, the era of the 1950s in America, you could actually make enough money as a man to support your wife, to have her be at home by herself without having to have a job. You don't have to have a daycare. You don't have to put your kids away in the daycare. You can have a single earner family. You can buy a house. That's the American dream, quote unquote. And I think that part of what Trump was referring to when he said, "Make America Great Again," is that gestalt that is still stuck in people's head who are old enough to remember that era. It wasn't until the 1970s that when you look at the actual curves that you start to see a very sharp decrease in the earning potential of the middle class. And it has really been in a state of ongoing collapse since that time. It has never really gotten better. So that as a result now, we don't have a middle class. We really do have super rich and poor and nothing in between. So as a result, those old school promises of materiality leading to happiness, that doesn't really work anymore. There's a lot of people now, especially in the younger generation, the millennials, they're having to figure out how to enjoy their lives without any of the stuff that would come with money. 35% of all kids 35 and under, and I can say that because I'm 44. Yeah, it is old. It's old for me. Stuff doesn't work the way it used to. I'll just leave it at that. My knees don't work. Frickin' shoulder hurts right now. It's like, you know. Got gray hairs in my sideburns now. What's going on? That American dream doesn't work anymore. It's gone. So when these people are out there trying to tell you, oh yeah, spend money and that'll, you know, if you earn money, then you'll be happy. No, it doesn't work that way. I've met some people who are extremely wealthy, and if you actually study the data, psychological data, it turns out that the people who are the most wealthy have exactly the same types of psychological problems at the same level of severity of the people who are the most poor who live in trailer parks. Literally. The pathology of the mental disturbance of that lifestyle, because basically once you get to that point of having that level of wealth, you are a hunted being. Everybody's after you. What happens when people win the lottery? Are they happy? No. They end up having to cut cords with all of their friends, because the secret of the lottery is that you don't really make that much money all at once. You get checks that are supposed to be spread out over 30, 40 years in many cases. It's very easy to blow all that money at once, but then everybody thinks that you have $30 million, and you don't. And then every person you know starts, even though they might really kind of stretch it out for a while, they eventually try to manipulate you into giving them money. So this is a spiritual war. And how could a group of people be inspired to destroy the biosphere, to pollute the oceans, to poison us with radiation, if you believe that a nuclear device was detonated in the seafloor near Fukushima, thus causing that disaster? And I do believe that's what it was. Why the hell would somebody want to do that? Why the hell would somebody want to have a nuclear war? A nuclear war devastates the whole planet. We're talking about a group of people who had developed a space program where they don't need this planet. They don't need to live on the surface. They can live underground perfectly comfortably. Lots of great housing down there. Beautiful, luxurious, amazing. You could nuke the planet to a cinder, and as long as the planet itself doesn't blow up, those areas underground will be fine. They've built a whole vast infrastructure in our solar system and elsewhere. There's plenty of places to live out there too. So this is expendable for them. What has happened is that people within that group have broken away, and they do not want to play this game. They do not want to destroy this beautiful planet. And ultimately, those people have been guided by benevolent, what we would now call extraterrestrial beings, what would be called angels in the Bible. And that does not mean that when I'm talking about the Alliance that I'm saying they are angels. These are people that came out of one of the most brutal, despotic regimes in the history of Earth, if not the most brutal. The modified, rebooted Roman Empire, where the spiritual head is Vatican City, financial head is City of London, and the military head is Washington, D.C. And they did have unparalleled power for a long time. But there have always been splinter groups and breakaway factions, and what has now occurred, and this is what's so amazing, is that the majority of the entire U.S. Department of Defense is engaged in a civil war in this country right now. Now listen to what I said. The majority of the entire Department of Defense is fighting the cabal. This is very misleading, because if I'm wearing a big team jersey here and it says 35 on the back, that means he's number 35 on that team. America is supposed to be a country with a leader that we voted for democratically, who has an agenda. That country has a certain position in the world. It has a certain role to play if there's a war. You don't really think about there being a war within a country. You don't really think about a country having different factions that are fighting against each other. You don't really think about an unacknowledged civil war that is very extreme, more intense, and more politically meaningful than the actual Civil War in the 1800s, that we are in World War III. It's already happening. It's happening right now, and thanks to the benevolent ETs, I believe has a lot to do with it, World War III has predominantly not been destructive in the physical sense. For many, many years, it's an open secret that Hollywood was being used by the Department of Defense to recruit people into the military. If you just think back to the 80s, any number of films, like, for example, Top Gun, Tom Cruise's breakaway role, one of them, it's totally jingoistic military propaganda film. You might love that film, but you go back and think about it, you're like, damn, yeah, and there's a lot of films like this. I'm not saying that's wrong. We need to have a military, and I essentially voluntarily enlisted in a civilian initiative that is very much what soldiers do, to fight against an enemy, to risk your life. Does that mean that if you're a keyboard warrior that you're any less brave? No. The monster under the bed, this gestalt, this supernatural evil that the cabal wants you to think they are, they want you to believe that that satanic evil is real, but that there's no credence to the positive side. The way I look at it is, if that satanic evil is real, and you know it is, then there has to be something behind all these positive spiritual traditions as well. So what we have now is films that are made by the Department of Defense. Ultimately, they made those films. And those films are preparing us for an exposure of the cabal. And you've seen me talk about some of these. One of the most incredible examples was the film Iron Man 3. A very, very popular film, the biggest film of the year. In that film, you have people who are infected with some sort of human enhancement virus that leads to them having redness appear on their skin. They're like demonic beings. And there is actually a scene where one of these beings melts a tower, and the tower comes down. They melt the steel beams. A vague but definite allusion to 9/11. You have a president who clearly was meant to look like George W. You have a vice president who clearly is supposed to look like Dick Cheney. And the punchline at the end of this movie, again, you can clearly trace that it was financed by the DOD, that it promotes the DOD. Iron Man has this smart suit that could very well be something similar to things that already exist, or at least maybe some degree of that. So that would be a really cool thing, to join a military in the future where you have a suit like Iron Man. And the point is that at the end of the movie, the Vice President of the United States is the one who financed a terrorist to attack the United States. A man played by Ben Kingsley, who was obviously supposed to be bin Laden. This was the biggest film of the year. So when people tell me that there's no credence in the idea that there is an alliance, I say, bullshit. Go watch these movies. Go watch the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier. It's unbelievable. The first Captain America movie had some interesting things in it, a few things. Nowhere near like what's in the second one. The second Captain America movie reveals that German scientists and political figures got transferred over here in Project Paperclip. Scarlett Johansson delivers the key lines in the movie. When at the exact midpoint of the movie, they end up in some German supercomputer left over from World War II that talks to them And they used the cool whirling things of the supercomputer as a visual to kind of pad the fact that they're doing a lot of exposition. The hardest thing to do in a Hollywood screenplay is to give a whole bunch of information verbally in a short time and still make it exciting. That's called exposition. They padded the exposition by having this weird, cool computer, so the computer can just say a whole bunch of stuff, and it's like a little mini documentary that's inserted into the movie Captain America: Winter Soldier. And that computer reveals that Germans were brought over here in World War II, Project Paperclip, and in the movie they have a group that is called Hydra, and Hydra is a secret Nazi faction in the United States that includes senators and congressmen. And in this movie, which again was the #1, or I think in that case it was the #2 movie of the year, I think it was beat out by Hunger Games, you have senators shaking each other's hand, whispering in each other's ear, "Hail Hydra!" This is totally real. It's a film that cost God knows how, $120, $150 million to make. It happened. So don't tell me that there's no alliance. The whole frickin' film ends with Hydra being publicly exposed in a WikiLeaks type of data dump. And then you have Scarlett Johansson speaking on behalf of the intelligence services saying, "You guys are going to need us to fight this thing." So one of the things that has aroused a lot of controversy on the internet is when I try to break this paradigm that the cabal wanted to install in our consciousness, that everything associated with government is bad. Oh my God, the CIA, that's bad. Oh my God, the FBI, that's bad. Oh my God, the DIA. Oh my God, the NSA. The NSA are the people, some of the people in the NSA designed Bitcoin because Bitcoin creates this thing called a blockchain that has a digitally stored copy of all the transactions that are made in Bitcoins in the world. Everybody has the full bookkeeping for all Bitcoin transactions in their blockchain. You cannot hide any transaction that you make in Bitcoin. You do not need a bank. You do not need an intermediary. It's all done digitally. According to Pete Peterson, that was done by the people in the alliance to create an alternative to the Federal Reserve dollar. The way you create Bitcoins is by what's called Bitcoin mining, where you take powerful computers and you generate these algorithms, and when they generate the solution, you've got a Bitcoin. And so your degree of Bitcoins is measured by how much computer power you can marshal if you want to do Bitcoin mining. That was an alternative to this Federal Reserve fiat currency, fiat meaning money printed out of thin air. And it works. And it's always been there in place in the time that it would be needed. We also have heard, everybody knows, well, yeah, DARPA started the internet. It was called first it was called ARPANET, which was the ARPA was from DARPA, and then it became the internet. What you don't usually hear, but again, we have from our old-timer insider, Pete Peterson, who was literally one of the most valuable people for Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney and Ronald Reagan. He was very active in the Reagan administration. They were dealing with all this absurd stuff that was going on behind the scenes that they were concealing from us. And when I say absurd, this includes literally a little flying saucer about this big appeared on Reagan's desk, and a little conveyor comes down, and these little beings come out, and they start talking to him that way. And there was a funny little movie called Batteries Not Included that was based on some of that intel. And they basically said that we had to stop using nuclear weapons. And that if we didn't, that they would have the power to make it very bad for us. Well, the military thinks if any type of ET wants to stop you from using nukes, that they have to be evil and that they're trying to take over. What they're starting to understand now is that we are the inheritors of a battle that has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years between good and bad ETs. The bad ETs want to create a money system, they want to create a slave state, they want to create institutional control, they want to dominate you because they literally live off of fear. This is the key. Where is the payoff? Why would anybody want to do this? Humans on Earth alone, it doesn't seem like that they would want to destroy their own planet. It seems like they get peer pressured into thinking that's a good idea. But there's other beings that are very, very evil, like the Draco reptilians, where they literally survive on energy. And specifically, they survive on the energy of fear, the energy of suffering, the energy of pain, the energy of trauma. And so when you get into this Pizzagate stuff, and why the hell would politicians sign up for something called North American Man-Boy Love Association, or NAMBLA? According to Peterson, 86% of Congress are members of NAMBLA. Now imagine what would happen if the full membership roster of NAMBLA were to be published. Imagine what would happen if we find out that even part of that number is true. Well, guess what? It already is happening. There already has been a revelation about the beloved American hero Bill Cosby with The Cosby Show. And he's doing all this crazy stuff. And yet, he had this show. And he was all the way on TV back during I Spy in the 1960s. Do you think they didn't know? Do you really think they didn't know when they were putting him out there as America's dad? And it's even worse in England, because there you have this character named Jimmy Savile, who was literally the front man for all the rock bands on the top program called Top of the Pops. And this guy continued to be on television right up until he died, with his final show being called Jim Will Fix It. And this guy is about as evil as you could ever imagine. He's got literally so many victims that they've estimated 1,450 victims. And some of the people who have testified have said that what he did was to go after them in a satanic ceremony where they're wearing robes and masks and chanting Ave Satanas, which in Latin means Hail Satan. And this guy is meeting with the Queen, the royal family. He's introducing us to the Beatles, to the Rolling Stones, to all the top 60s bands on television. He was a beloved hero. And he created 40+ children's hospitals. And the data now suggests that each of these children's hospitals had a rape room where satanic ceremonies took place. That is public record, indisputable. So we already know. And then if it's happening over there, and Bill Cosby is one of the ones that's gotten caught over here, and everybody looks the other way. You have this famous actor, Corey Feldman, among several major figures who have said that Hollywood is pedophilia, that that's the big dark secret of Hollywood. All kinds of stuff has come forward about this. Amy Berg did a whole documentary on this. It got suppressed. An Open Secret is the name of the film. You can now see it. I don't want to dwell too much in this negativity stuff, but I want you to at least be aware that it's there. Because if you're not aware, that enables the enemy to continue what it's doing. We have the power, as each one of you here, remember, we have the power to change the outcome. And I want to talk a little bit about chaos theory. Chaos theory arises out of this knowledge that you could look at a little part of the sand here on the ground, and you're going to see a structure that will repeat on much larger levels throughout the mountains. That's called fractal. Small fractions of something look the same as much larger versions. This is where you get this often quoted idea that the flap of the butterfly's wing could eventually create a tsunami on the other side of the world, or a typhoon. When we actually study the physics of a pile of sand, now just stay with me, it sounds like I'm going way off track, I'm totally not. Sand is falling one grain at a time in like an hourglass, let's say, and if you watch and observe and meditate on the hourglass, you'll see that the sand mountain builds up to a certain point and then maybe half of it avalanches. But then after the avalanche, it rebuilds itself right again very, very quickly into a new cone. Now imagine that you could, and this has been done, so this is true, imagine that you could build a supercomputer simulation of an hourglass. And now what you have is the ability to track the location and the behavior and the amount of actual pressure and stress on each individual grain of sand. You know where it is, you know how much pressure is on it, you know which way it wants to move, and you graph out the entire sand pile that way with supercomputer, fuzzy logic number crunching, and you know what each particle of sand wants to do. That's our setup. This has been done. Something happens that the Cabal cannot control. It is a law of the universe, and it is the key to their defeat. The hourglass contains the secret to defeating the Cabal, believe it or not. Because what happens is the pile stays stable for a period of time. You know the position and you know the stress on each individual particle of sand for a period of time. You can measure how much push there is on each particle. At a certain point, as the sand keeps falling on the top, the pile starts to destabilize, and this gets worse and worse and worse. The system becomes chaotic. Now, in conventional science, chaos does not seem to have anything useful. But in chaos theory, the word chaos comes to the forefront because chaos changes all the rules in a very interesting way. And the best way to describe this is to look at what happens in the supercomputer as the pile is about to avalanche. Right before the sand pile is about to collapse into an avalanche, you no longer can detect where any of those particles are going to go. The stress on them starts to become indistinct. There's no clear vector of which line it's going to move, of where it's being pushed. Everything kind of goes into this funny state where it could go in multiple directions. And then there is an avalanche, but what they've discovered is that the avalanche relieves pressure, and instantaneously the sand pile reorganizes into a higher level of complexity, a higher level of organization. It's a positive thing. Now, of course, some of you are probably thinking, well, order out of chaos, that's the Illuminati freaking religious motto that they have. They don't understand what this actually means, and here's the key. There is no way to contrive how that particle of sand, how that whole pile of sand will move. There's no way to set it up in advance to determine where the avalanche is going to go. When it goes into that moment of chaos, it becomes indistinct. And the analysis in the supercomputer has determined that as little as one single particle of sand determines the entire outcome of how the avalanche takes place and how it reorganizes into a higher level of complexity and order. As little as a single particle of sand determines that. Now, why am I talking about sand? Because the sand pile is what's called a complex system, meaning that there are a series of individual agents in the system, in this case particles of sand, all of which have simple rules, like the fact that they're being pulled on by gravity, like the fact they're falling from a single point for a certain distance, and they land on top of the other sand particles, and then you're charting out, how much pressure is on them and where do they want to go, how much do they want to move in any given direction. If you can wrap your head around how that applies to human beings, it does, because we are also agents in a complex system. We have individual free will, but there's also constraints. We can't just go fly off into outer space. We don't have the ability to do that. So one of the domains in which we have to work is the Earth. We all have a certain amount of money we can make. Most of us do not have the ability to earn much more than a certain amount of money, unless some very unusual, extraordinary circumstances take place. But here's the key. The system has full communication capability. Any agent in the system can reach any other agent in the system. As soon as that happens, as soon as you have intercommunication between all elements of the system, now the magic of fractals takes place. Now you have a complex system. Now you have a system in which these mysterious laws of the universe can happen because of the communication, because of the exchange of information, which in the sand pile, the information is exchanged by the fact that they're all in this pile and the pressures are pushing on different parts of the pile all at the same time. A little bit of a weight shift up there affects everything else down below. So as the new particles pile on the top, that changes the overall pressure and the profile of the entire pile. And every other particle will be measured. You can see slight changes in the stress as the pile expands. So what does this mean? It means they, the cabal, cannot create a global economic collapse. It's impossible. Now granted, they were able to do it in local areas in the past, like they were able to do the French Revolution. They were able to cut off shipments of goods into France so that people were starving. This is one of the ways in which the French started. I have a good buddy of mine who's a visual effects artist who's French, and he told me, David, we didn't start eating things like rabbits and snails because that was the best that we could find. It was the only thing we could find. Things like rabbit and escargot, which are now considered delicacies in France, that was because they had all other food cut off. They had their crops destroyed, they had their livestock destroyed, they had all imports cut off by the cabal, artificially creating this crazy situation that led to the French Revolution. And France had been messed with before that as well. It didn't just happen then. So yeah, you can look at the French Revolution and then you can see that there was this reign of terror, as it was called, where they basically created a dearth of food, a dearth of money, and then anybody who tried to do anything unethical to get food was deemed a terrorist, and then they said terrorists must be responded to with terrorism. So they had guillotines in the street, and they were beheading people who tried to steal a scrap of bread. No forgiveness, no ability to argue your case. This actually happened. So that's like the Illuminati wet dream, but it all ended very quickly. The people said, we're not going to do this. And all the leaders who were responsible for this reign of terror, including Robespierre and some others, they all ended up getting beheaded too. So that's why one of the cabal symbols is the phoenix, the bird that dies and is reborn out of the ashes. And they showed that in the 2012 Olympics ceremonies very prominently. They believe that they are going to be defeated, but that their initiative will continue because there's always a little bit extra that hangs on. Well, what's happened now is, thanks to the magic of chaos theory, we have a global, interconnected system that exchanges information with the internet. The cabal will never be able to defeat the internet because, here's the key, it's called CAS, Complex Adaptive Systems. It's another aspect of this science that I'm teaching you now. Complex adaptive systems, what does that mean? Once you have a system in which all agents can exchange information, it adapts. It becomes complex adaptive, meaning if you try to disable that system, if you try to break up that system, it changes in totally unpredictable ways to enable itself to keep going. So it is literally, if you really get into fractals and chaos theory, it is literally impossible for the cabal to achieve their goals. They cannot create a global economic collapse. They cannot destroy the system. They cannot have everybody hauled off to concentration camps. They don't have enough people to hold the guns. They don't have the boots on the ground. They don't have the support of their own military. So what is happening now? Let me see how much time I got here. Okay, good. Plenty of time. What is happening now is that the military has turned against the cabal. Now, the cabal still has some degree of control over what's going on, but they are losing it very, very rapidly. Oh, wait till we get into this. Yeah, you're going to be clapping a lot. Okay, let's talk about Trump. Now, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I'm not a Trump hater either. I'm looking at this as an opportunity. I'm looking at this with an open mind. I'll tell you some of the things that I saw. I saw emails of Hillary bragging about how they could sacrifice a chicken to Moloch in the backyard. One of Hillary's associates writing her this as a joke. No, that's not freaking funny. I look at the fact that Hillary's own mentor, who she wrote her college thesis about, was Saul Alinsky, who dedicates his book to Lucifer in the 1970s. I got into the Pizzagate stuff, and we did not like it. The people I was dealing with, we worked on this as a team. It was very, very upsetting. And then look at what happens. WikiLeaks comes out with emails indicting people very close to Hillary's campaign. And if you have an open mind, it is not hard to see this is just more of the Jimmy Savile crap, but it's in America. Same crap. Very, very disturbing stuff. Then what starts to happen? They decide, the cabal decides to call everything that we talk about fake news, and through a totally undemocratic process that we cannot control, they take the distribution channels for alternative media that they themselves created, things like Google, things like Facebook, things like Apple News, things like Twitter. Half the time that people send me shit on Facebook, there's a little exclamation mark with a triangle around it that's in red. And it says, "This attachment cannot be loaded." I get those constantly because they made a decision, the cabal made a decision, oh, we have to protect you from fake news, so we're not even going to allow you to frickin' see it. Gaia was on the first list of the first 200 fake news websites. That is true. If you've had any doubts about our affiliation, check that out. Because what sources were promoted as being real news? All of the good old-fashioned Mighty Wurlitzer, as it was called, Mockingbird, which is a CIA program, controlled mainstream media. And now they have literally demonetized YouTube in something that's called adpocalypse. If you talk about anything political at all, they will not allow you to sell ads on your YouTube channel, period. I had never sold ads on any of my YouTube videos. People are like, David, you could have made $2,000 on that one. You could have made $5,000 on that one. I'm like, well, you know, I'm not willing to sell out for a penny a click. It's true. I never did it. We have Snowden come into the picture in 2013, revealing all this stuff about the NSA. I don't think it's talking out of school to tell you that that was not just Snowden that did that. There was a lot of people in the NSA that wanted him to do that, that worked together to make that happen. Snowden was their official face man for a much greater hidden initiative. He didn't just figure this thing out on his own. He had extensive support. WikiLeaks is not just Julian Assange. Anonymous actually is the U.S. military. Remember, the DoD has made films like Iron Man 3, where the Vice President of the United States finances a bin Laden to attack American targets. Captain America, where you have Germans transferred over here after World War II that try to destroy all life on Earth while being involved in a secret society that has penetrated the intelligence services but needs the good guys in the intelligence services to fight it. This battle is real, and the biggest secret of the cabal has always been the UFO cover-up. They don't want you to know what's really going on. Why don't they want you to know what's really going on? Because guess what, folks? All that stuff that you see in the Bible, all that stuff that you see in the Quran, all that stuff that you see in the Torah, all that stuff that you see in the Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedas, all that stuff that you see in Buddha's Book of Righteousness, it's true. The beings that gave us that information are real. The battle has not stopped. Everybody's kind of held back, all the ETs have held back to let us become quote-unquote modern, which is kind of a joke in light of their technology. But we are surrounded by extraterrestrials, both good and evil. But there are these strange rules in place, rules that are ultimately authored by a benevolent universe, rules that prevent the bad guys from being able to completely take over. Rules that require them to advertise who they are and what they're doing in order for any of their initiatives to work. Do you really think they want, if they totally could do this however they wanted, do you think they want to be constantly telling us what they're up to in symbolic form, to be advertising, to make books and movies and television shows that reveal their agenda? They have to do that. That was the trick that Queen Elizabeth's court astrologer John Dee figured out. The magic is that you have to tell the people what you're doing, therefore they accept enslavement. And the key word that you always hear these cabal people use is authorize. Nothing will happen to you that you haven't authorized. My top-level Secret Space Program insider, the man I call Jacob, who had a much higher level position than the one that Corey Goode had when Corey was in it. Corey now has had access to some very unique assets, but while he was in it, let's be honest, Corey was basically a grunt. He didn't have any command authority beyond a certain point, and he's not going to get mad at me for saying that. He would acknowledge that too. He's an ordinary guy who just happened to have a very unusual job by our standards. The guy that I'm talking about, Jacob, was working directly with the Rothschilds. And they tried to bring me in. I mean, I got bribed, and I didn't accept any of these bribes. They were bribe offers that I turned down. They were offers to make hundreds of millions of dollars. And you better believe that I would rather die than sell out to the fucking Illuminati. Thank you. If I had, there would be very different stuff coming out, because one of the things they wanted me to do is to promote Lucifer, to talk about Lucifer as a misunderstood, benevolent angel who is a liberator of humanity, freeing us from sexual oppression, freeing us from scientific heresy, so that we actually get to look through the telescope. That's the argument. That's the enticement. I had a television network try to get me to promote Lucifer in a show, and I turned them down. You want to know why I'm turning you down? Turn on the camera. I'm happy to explain it. You want to know why I think Lucifer is no good? You could frame him as a misunderstood extraterrestrial, a fallen angel that's had dominion over the earth, but here's the deal. There are people like Jimmy Savile who are out there using that name of Lucifer to torture and murder children and adults, to commit acts of rape, to destroy this beautiful planet. Anybody who is out there thinking that I am somehow working for the cabal, you have lost your fucking mind. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for dropping F-bombs, but this is serious. I'm out here risking my life. I have 2 armed guards because we had very serious threats for me to even be on this stage right now. That's why I'm not holding back. Okay? Thank you. So, this man was acting as a whistleblower. He had worked for the Rothschilds, who control a lot of what's going on in the secret space program. This man had meetings where Draco reptilians were all talking about how they control the earth. And he said that they were very catty and mean, nasty people, and he likened it to a bunch of cigarette-chomping grandmas at bingo. Now these beings, because he was working, remember, on the front lines, he was working with the Rothschilds on the front lines. He told me that he had personally visited he had personally seen 400 different off-planet locations that he traveled to via portals. 400! He had seen thousands of different types of humanoid-looking extraterrestrials in his travels. So this is a guy who's working on the tip of the spear for the negative forces on Earth, or what they call Pendragon, the penis of the dragon, the highest rank in the Illuminati. And he wanted to come clean because he did not like what was going on. He told me a lot of stuff, and he got in a lot of trouble. It's amazing he's still alive, but he made it. The most important thing he ever told me is that they cannot shoot the Red Cross workers. It is a cosmic law. And I want you to recognize that, and I want you to take that in, because it is so important. What do I mean by Red Cross workers? What does that actually mean? It means if you are out there bravely spreading knowledge, now you can't even make money doing it on YouTube. You can talk about Pizzagate now. It doesn't even matter because they can't do anything more. I deliberately did not make any Pizzagate videos because I didn't want to get quote-unquote demonetized, even though I hadn't monetized my videos anyway. Now it doesn't even matter. Nobody can make money on YouTube anymore talking about this stuff. It's gone. All those people have to have alternative income. They'll still allow you to make videos and upload them, but then they bury them in the feed. So you have to deliberately go look for this stuff. That shows me that there are people losing. The cabal is losing. They don't want information to be spread, but you can't stop this thing. The system still has full information communication between all agents. We have email, we have telephone calls. It's never going to be stopped. It's only going to move into a higher level of beauty and sophistication that will not include the powers that were. I don't use the term powers that be. They cannot shoot the Red Cross workers. What does that mean? If you are out there and you are trying to help the planet, you are a Red Cross worker. What is the Red Cross? There might be some children in the audience who don't know what that means. You're in a war, okay? Let's say that there's a big war. And let's say that you have a group of people whose job is to help the sick and the wounded. What they would do, and this goes to World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, you name it. They have a big tent, and the tent has a white top with a red cross on the top. And there are international laws that were passed that it is a war crime, that you cannot drop a bomb on a Red Cross tent. You're not allowed to shoot them. Because at that point, those soldiers are not any risk to you, and they're wounded, and they have a right, they have a basic human right to be allowed to recuperate. So the way this applies to that metaphor that he gave me is very straightforward. You have to be a genuinely integrous person to gain this protection of which I speak. You cannot be duplicitous. It is very important if you're out there, and I believe right now, I've been talking to you all weekend about this ascension process, that all of these things that we're talking about right now, all of this stuff with the politics and the intrigue, it's all kind of like in the background of a much greater story, which is this spiritual war. The bad guys want us to be enslaved and want us to be negative and depressed. The positive beings want us to ascend and transform into the next level of human evolution. And the universe set it up this way. The negative side only survives by loosh, as it's called. And I learned about this from Jacob. He told me that one of the greatest vulnerabilities, if not the greatest vulnerability of the Draco, of the Cabal, is that if a majority, not even everybody, but if a majority of people on Earth simply laughed and were happy for one day, the Cabal would be permanently and forever defeated. It is absolutely true. So what do? They stage things like Robin Williams' suicide. They stage things like the revealing of Bill Cosby, America's Dad, being a serial rapist. They deliberately knock off somebody like Michael Jackson or Whitney Houston, celebrity murders, to try to increase the loosh, to try to increase how bad people feel. And it just happened again with Chris Cornell, the guy that was the lead singer for Soundgarden. Now the only major hero from the grunge rock era left is Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, and everybody's like texting him saying, please don't kill yourself, please don't kill yourself. It's kind of ridiculous, but true. So you don't have fun being a celebrity. It's a very traumatic life. And we've learned this through many, many of these kind of behind-the-music things, like what VH1 used to have. Boom and bust. People blow all their money, they don't save anything, they don't plan for their not having a career in the future. The Cabal cannot shoot the Red Cross workers. Now, we're not going to get into all the details of why somebody would have died. There are many different reasons why certain people do pass at certain times. You may have had that as your soul's mission. You may have had a mission to go a certain length of time, to do certain things, and then that's when you're done. Some deaths are natural and caused by old age, other deaths are not. Some deaths would be authorized because that inspires the resistance to go to the next level. But if you look at how many people are exposing the Cabal on the internet, and that the best they can do is take away a penny per click of income from your videos, it's not that bad. Very, 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 very few people who talk about this have ever been messed with, and even fewer have ever been killed. There's hardly any examples. It's very, very rare. So don't believe for a minute that talking about this puts some kind of target on your back where you're now going to be executed. It's not true. That's what they want you to believe. Oh my God, I couldn't be up there like David. He's got balls. Right? A lot of people have told that to me. It's the majority. Okay, look. Trump may be very disappointing to most of the people in this audience. Some of you may have been glad that he won. I don't know what you think. We were hearing beforehand that Trump had decided to work with the alliance. We were talking about this on Cosmic Disclosure. There were videos all over the internet about this. Cosmic Disclosure was getting advertised every day on the front page of Drudge Report, which was the main website probably that was responsible for Trump winning. Drudge drops links to Alex Jones all the time. Bilderberg, Illuminati. Alex Jones has done a lot of great information. He was just another one of the guys out there talking about this when I got online in 1995. Now he's got a huge empire. But the disservice that I feel Alex Jones is doing in certain respects is that he often goes at a very fast speed and cites a whole lot of information without having the citations that he includes in his talk to back it up. So he tosses out all this stuff, and what they're trying to do now, what the cabal is trying to do now, is act as if all of this trutherism is just an Alex Jones fever dream. And you can't take this guy seriously because he's crazy and he screams and he wears his socks on his ears and all this kind of stuff. And look, I laugh my ass off when I watch Alex Jones videos, okay? And he knows that. It's part of the game. It's funny. But I also know that if you follow through on a lot of the things that Alex Jones says, you'll discover he's telling the truth. And so, did I want the alliance-backed candidate to be this guy who has very obvious narcissistic personality disorder? No. Do I want to be out there politically endorsing a man who basically was the "you're fired" guy on Celebrity Apprentice? No. Okay? But you've got to look behind the obvious here. You've got to see what's going on. You've got to realize that we are in a civil war. We've never had somebody win a presidential election and take on the media the way that Trump has done. It's never happened before. Why did they try to shove Hillary through to become the presidential candidate when Bernie Sanders literally had a much better chance of defeating Trump? What the hell was that about? All we had to do is look at Watergate. All the frickin' guy Nixon did is he wiretapped his enemy's phone. Hillary had like 25 Watergates. And they kept coming out and coming out and coming out. And it's just, nope, we're going to shove her right through. They'd already printed copies of Newsweek where she had won the election. They already had it written and ready to go. I don't think they expected Trump to win. I really don't. And the guy's made a lot of mistakes, but you have to understand something here. The people that are behind him, whether you love it or hate it, they are not cabal. They are purging the cabal out of the government, the military, and the media. I look at Donald Trump as a battering ram that smashes the hole in the castle so everybody else can run in. It doesn't usually work out too well for the battering ram. Okay? But I want to be clear on this, and this is a very dicey thing to talk about. It's like you can't even talk about Trump in a positive way at all. I'm not even trying to talk about him positively, right? I've said a lot of things to knock the man here. But I'm just saying, let's not immediately go into this 180 fever dream where the only way, the only hope that we have is to impeach him as fast as we can. That's what the controlled cabal media is trying to tell us now. So he has all kinds of personality flaws and character defects, and he annoys the heck out of some of the people in my family to the point that they think he's Hitler, literally. And a significant number of people in American families have been torn apart by this election. But in a way, and you guys know this, the election was a referendum on how much truth you really understand. Because if you actually look at what Trump was really saying in these speeches, it's a lot of the same stuff that I've been saying for years and many other people on stages like this have been saying for years. Trutherism became mainstream, and trutherism frickin' won the U.S. presidential election. And that is amazing. It is amazing. So what we're hearing now is that there is a major push to prosecute Pizzagate on an official level. Why did Trump just fire the director of the FBI, James Comey? because he wouldn't prosecute Pizzagate. That's what we're hearing from the inside sources. There are Trump has convened multiple secret grand juries to investigate this, and they are coming up with so much stuff. There is a massive alliance effort underway right now to eliminate the cabal. And I am not, again, saying these guys are angels. You have to understand this. The alliance are people who came out of the Illuminati, who turned their backs on what they were in. They may very well be Freemasons. They may very well be high-ranking Masons, 33rd degree Masons. They may very well be in the CIA. They may very well be in the NSA. We have to think differently. Be willing to accept that there are people who are fighting and dying for our future liberation from this evil satanic group. And don't get stuck on this idea that the only people who know about this are on the internet, sending internet chain letters around and watching YouTube videos. And it's us and them, and it's either YouTube and internet ghetto, or everybody else is the cabal. And everybody in the government's the cabal, and everybody in the military, and everybody in the intelligence service. It is not true. Trump was not supposed to win. That was not part of the plan. We're in some weird alternate, frickin' Willy Wonka, over the rainbow, parallel universe where, where a reality TV star is now the President of the United States. A man who sold steaks named after himself that you would buy frozen in the mail. All right, so what I'm trying to get to is they can't shoot the Red Cross workers, and that's where you come in. How do you become a Red Cross worker? How do you enjoy this spiritual protection? You don't want to authorize your own death. How do you avoid that? It's very simple. All you need to do is be a person of real integrity. The only way that you could authorize your death if you start spreading the word, and remember, you have, to a certain degree, an obligation. You're not coming here to sit in that chair and be entertained and to get high on, oh, wow, the David Wilcock talk was so amazing, man. Make other people high. Share that joint. Let everybody take a toke. If you do that and you're a good person, nothing bad is going to happen to you. You're not going to authorize anything bad. Doesn't it drive you crazy that we have so much great information, the speakers that are at this event? It is bursting. It's an embarrassment of riches. There's a funny word most people don't know called surfeit, S-U-R-F-E-I-T. It literally means there's such a glut of something that it's like it makes you fat. And you're just like sick because you can't eat it all. You can't possibly go to all these events, right? Look at the schedule. There's like 5 columns. Well, I got to pick this one, this one, this one, this one, or this one. Okay. But this is all about us coming together and us sharing in a community experience who we are and what we're learning. The data is there. And believe me, we are not alone. There are plenty of people. Most of the world is now the alliance. Most of the countries in their official governmental capacities are against the cabal. They know about it, they're fighting against it, and they're trying to bring about full disclosure. It's true. I'm up here because I'm willing to put myself out there publicly at an event this large. There's no freaking bulletproof glass in front of the stage. Now, the point is, we all have an obligation to share what we know. We have an obligation to get out there and co-create the future that we want to see. Instead of expecting, like what Jimmy Church was saying when he introduced me the other time, why haven't we heard more from David Wilcock? Or why haven't we heard more from so-and-so? And yes, I just talked about myself in third person, which is considered ego. Okay, fine. It's just making a point. Oh my God, David has an ego. Oh my God, he's making money. You have to make money if you're going to do this. You can't get financed by something else. And you guys are helping us. You're helping everybody here by being a part of this. We're co-creating this thing. You guys are my ground crew. Right? And I appreciate you, and I thank you for that. Awesome. Thank you so much.